is Dan, and this is SLAYsmr, an ASMR channel where every week I talk about a different horror movie that I love. Today's film, if you didn't figure it out by the giant orca coming out the side of my head, accompanied by a giant shark right there, and then another giant shark on the side of my head, is 1975's Jaws. I chose Jaws for many reasons. It's definitely one of my favorite horror movies, probably my second favorite horror movie next to Halloween. I love sharks. I could talk about sharks and Jaws and horror movies for hours and hours. I get so revved up, as you'll see, when talking about all those things. But more importantly, today is Labor Day, which I view as the last day of summer. I know it's not technically the last day of summer, but let's be real, it's the last day of summer. It's the last day that we have a break, a day off for a while. A lot of us have had a lot of days off as of late, not intentionally, but still Labor Day is Labor Day for me. That is the end of summer, so I figured we would close out the summer with the mother of all summer blockbusters, the one that created the summer blockbuster, the movie that started it all, star of the blockbuster, kicked off the nation's severe and unwarranted phobia of sharks, Jaws, directed by Steven Spielberg, based on the book by Peter Benchley. You know it, you love it. Even if you haven't seen it, I'm sure you know what the basic premise of this film and the book are. But a quick rundown, just in case you don't. Jaws is essentially about a great white shark that begins attacking and killing people off the coast of a fictional island called Amity Island. Actually, Martha's Vineyard, filmed there. And the chief of police, Martin Brody, played by Roy Scheider, has to decide how to deal with it, and his initial response is to close the beaches, shut everything down, but he has to contend with a town that doesn't want its economy going in the toilet during the summer season, as well as a mayor. Things progress. Eventually he has to take things into his own hands and enlist the help of an ichthyologist. I don't know if he's an ichthyologist technically, but let's say it's that, named Matt Hooper, played by Richard Dreyfuss, and a shark hunter named Quint, played by Robert Shaw. And the third act of the movie is essentially these three men hunting down this shark. I know this is a really weird way to kick it off. Usually I kick it off by talking about the first time I saw the movie and my thoughts on it. We'll get to that, but I actually just read this Medium article where an author talks about the role that masculinity plays in this movie, how Brody's essentially at the heart, Hooper's the brain, and Quint, I think I want to say is the guts. The idea being that all three of these men have different strengths that are very outward, but what all three of them lack is a willingness to be truly vulnerable around each other and others and express emotion. And as this writer has gotten older, he thinks about Jaws a lot in those terms, that even though at the end of the movie the shark is dead, when the two surviving men go home, they're probably still not going to grapple with a lot of the demons they faced and just some of their own vulnerability within themselves. The example he used was the moment that we don't see is that the chief is going to go home, and he'll talk about killing the shark and whatnot, but what we don't see is that he's going to break down and cry about it when he gets into bed with his wife. I don't know if I'm doing this article any kind of justice, but it's been on my mind, and I'm excited to rewatch the movie through that lens. I've heard a lot of people talk about how Jaws is about masculinity and vulnerability, just on a very shallow surface level, but this Medium article that I read was a really concrete, excellent, in-depth analysis of this. And of course, I don't remember the guy's name. I'll find it though, and I will link in the description. My good friend Mel Castle, who is a excellent science fiction horror writer in her own right, and a co-host of the Losers Club. She had posted this article on Twitter, and that's where I saw it. Anyway, so once again, I know that's a weird way to start off this ASMR, but it's on my mind, so I thought I'd share it with you. And if you're interested, click on the link. It's a great article. It's in the description there. Anyway, back to simpler times. The first time I saw Jaws, I was 8 years old and living in Clinton, South Carolina, which, funnily enough, I took a little road trip to last weekend. I was safe. I was just by myself. I wanted to get away for a little bit and get some writing done, so, and I can't go anywhere like fancy right now, A, because, yeah, money, and also B, it's just not safe, so I wanted to go somewhere within driving distance of Atlanta, and so I decided to go to this small town in South Carolina where I lived for just half a year when I was 8 years old. And it's funny because this town looks exactly like it did when I used to live there. There's a pizza restaurant that had this cookie dough dessert pizza, and I got some of that to go, and that still tasted the same. Everything looked the same. The YMCA, the school. The one thing that was not there anymore, and I was really hoping it would be, but it wasn't, was the video store we used to go to on the way home from swim practice. It was pretty good from what I remember. They had a lot of the old Marvel cartoons like Spider-Man and a lot of the Universal horror films, a lot of the Hammer horror films. I saw a lot of really good stuff from that video store when I was 8 years old, including Jaws. Jaws was on my mind a lot when I lived there because I was, like I said, there was a YMCA and I was swimming a lot. And whenever I was in the pool with my friends, people would always say, "Oh, you want to play sharks and minnows?" Which, of course, is, one person starts off as the shark and they try and catch people in the pool, and the more people they catch, the more people transform into a shark, and you get the idea. And every now and then someone would just call the game Jaws. Instead of calling it Sharks and Minnows, they would call it Jaws, and they would, hum the theme music, John Williams' iconic theme, the dun 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 dun. They would swim around trying to get people. And I knew what Jaws was. I think the poster was famous enough at that point. I had seen it parodied enough at that point. And it was like one of those things you talk about in the playground, right? Or by the swimming pool. It just seemed to be in kid language in a way that perhaps Nightbreed or Creature from Black Lagoon or some of the other horror movies we've talked about weren't. The movies I remember hearing the most about on the playground were Jaws, Aliens, and Nightmare on Elm Street. I feel like those were the ones that really resonated with kids my age, at least where I lived. So I asked my dad if we could rent it, and he said of course. And it's funny thinking back, because it's a PG movie technically, but it's pretty bloody and pretty terrifying. At first, you don't really see the shark a lot, which we'll talk about in a bit why that is and why it's effective. But as the movie goes on, you actually do see quite a bit of the shark, and you see the shark do some pretty violent things, and so looking back, I'm surprised it was a PG film, and I can understand why I was really scared when I saw it, because it did feel like maybe a little bit more visceral than I was used to seeing. So yeah, we watched it. I loved it. And this was pre-streaming days, so I felt like anytime it was on USA or TBS or whatever basic cable channel showed it, it was like an event. Like you would go over to your friend's house and eat dinner and eat some popcorn and watch this movie. And then as I got older, the first time it came out on DVD, it was an event. The first time it came out on Blu-ray, it was an event. I feel like any new version of this movie, or just anytime the movie's on, I stop what I'm doing and I watch it. The DVD, which I think was the 25th anniversary release, yeah, because the movie came out in 75, I would have been 15 in the year 2000, which is when the DVD came out. I remember a documentary and just all these extras when it showed storyboards they didn't use. That was a big deal for me. I remember it was summer and my parents were at home and they gave me some money to ride my bike to, I think I bought it at Kmart or something, ride my bike there and get the special edition. And we watched it, and although I had seen Jaws before, that was the first time I had it in my possession and could go back and watch things over and over, and I kid you not, I would just go to all of the shark parts in the movie. And at first it was just to really get a good idea of what the shark looked like, but then at a certain point I think I was looking for reveals of the shark that I may have missed. Like maybe the shark was under the water in silhouette and I just hadn't noticed it before. Or for instance in the opening scene where a young swimmer ventures out to a buoy and gets eaten by the shark, and you don't see the shark at all, you just see her getting jostled around. I was convinced that, oh no, you can probably see the shark underneath the water, which is totally silly, right? Because part of why you don't see the shark in that opening scene, part of why the shark at a certain point in the movie is mainly represented by these yellow barrels that they harpoon into its back, is because the famous phrase, the shark isn't working. Spielberg, had his team build this massive shark. There were, I think, 3 different versions of it. There was one that had half of its profile, the other that at the other half of the profile, they were kind of just on cranes that you would lower in and out of the water. Then you had one that got towed by a boat, and there may have been like a big head too. But anyway, as cool as the shark looks, it didn't work a lot, and they were over budget and under time, and so as a compromise they just started not showing it a lot, at least until the end of the movie. In that first scene where Christy gets eaten, originally if you look at those storyboards, the shark was supposed to leap out of the water and bite her in half and go back down, and that's how it's described in Peter Benchley's book. It's actually a really graphic, kind of killer opening scene, and the storyboards are really creepy. You see her swimming, and then you see the shark in silhouette, and then coming up beneath her. But yeah, that's not how they filmed it. They literally just filmed her getting dragged around. But I was convinced as a 15-year-old kid that, oh no, the shark puppet must be under there somewhere. I'm sure I'll be able to see it. And of course, that's not the case, because given everything we know about the movie, why would they put the shark under there? But yeah, so when that DVD came out, though, I was just obsessed with going through all the shark footage and trying to figure out which puppet was used, or which robot was used, animatronic, whatever you're gonna call it. And then also, when they would use real shark footage toward the end of the movie, where Hooper goes in a shark cage underneath to try and essentially get the shark with some poison. They got Ron and Valerie Taylor, who were two very famous shark filmographers. They got them to go in the cage underneath and film actual great whites and use it in the movie. And at one point, the shark actually did strike the cage and got caught and thrashed around until it's escaped. You can actually see that footage in the movie. But yeah, so I was really also obsessed with figuring out when it was the real shark and when it was the fake shark. Nowadays, it's actually pretty easy to tell, I think. I talked about this on the Creature from the Black Lagoon episode. As someone who's seen sharks underwater, and from above water, it looks very different. Underwater, the shark always looks majestic. Even when it attacks, it kind of looks majestic, although it's scary. But then if you look at the same thing from above water, if they're going after chum or fish or whatever, it looks totally chaotic. The entire time it looks chaotic. It's so interesting to me how there's that dissonance in vision above and below water. And I think the movie actually captures that really beautifully. It's funny because a lot of retrospectives I read about Jaws talk about how the movie is great, but the shark doesn't hold up. That Bruce, the mechanical shark, named after Steven Spielberg's lawyer, it just looks like this big, clunky, clumsy eating machine and isn't as scary as a shark would be in real life. Now, I agree it does not look real. I totally agree with that. Especially if you look at the jawline on the shark. A shark in real life has a single boned jaw, so it's all part of just one big bone that can actually jut out when it gets prey. So it actually looks pretty fluid. It'll hook onto something, then shake it around like a dog. But in the movie, they just had the mouth kind of move up and down. It wasn't able to go out and give that kind of fluid motion. So there's this, I don't know, the best way I can describe it is it looks like the two halves of its jaws are smushing together, and it creates this weird funny line. You can see that pretty much anytime they show the shark in the movie, but that doesn't bother me at all, and I'll tell you why. First off, if I was stuck in the water with that thing, the big clunky robot thing, I would still be scared for my life. I might even be more scared than if I saw a real shark, because like I said, a real shark has grace and beauty about it. I feel like I would be hypnotized by the shark, whereas with that thing, it looks blunt and relentless and scary and nightmarish and from another world. So already, it just looks scary to me, regardless of whether or not it looks real, right? And the other reason I think it works really well is because it ties back to that underwater, above water separation. What I love about the film is when Hooper's in the cage, when he's just seeing the shark drift by. It's a real shark. It's a real shark, filmed by Ron and Valerie Taylor. And once again, you get that hypnotic kind of magnetic effect. And then once it attacks the cage, once the jaws come in, it's back to the clunky robot shark. So to me, it's this reminder that we can't tame nature, and even though we're fascinated by nature, and even though it looks beautiful to us, in an instant, it can switch and turn on us and attack us, because nature doesn't owe us anything. In fact, nature probably has a lot to be mad about when it comes to humans. And then, of course, eventually, once Hooper escapes the cage and the shark gets caught and thrashes around, and that's the real footage again. But I actually really love that jolting difference we see between the fake shark and the real shark. It's almost like the shark is beautiful until it's not. I think it's super cool, and like I said, really, really holds up. Also, to me, if we're thinking about the shark as a metaphor, this force that kind of looms over the town and looms over all of these men's unexpressed issues within themselves, it makes sense to me if it looks a little bit more menacing and imposing and bigger and monolithic like that. To me, actually, is very much more within the theme of the movie. And the book, too. The book actually goes more into that, because in the book, Brody's wife is cheating on him with Hooper, and their marriage is kind of falling apart. So that's a whole thing in the book, and they really go a lot more into Amity Island's dire financial straits. So everything in the book is kind of decaying, and the shark is almost just this embodiment of all this decay and entropy and things just ending. So once again, I think that big, oversized eating machine, unstoppable look of the shark actually ties into the dismal outlook of the book. And the movie's outlook isn't quite as dismal, but once again, if we're thinking of it as metaphor, I actually think that all lines up pretty well in regards to the theme. Talking about how the shark is revealed, I mentioned how they had to come up with ways to show the shark without showing the shark. We see the Christy Watkins' death, which is freaky. It's really an iconic opening scene. But the creepiest shark attack to me, by far, in the film, is the death of Alex Kidner, who is the little boy who gets killed. Is the second victim in the film. This guy's kind of the victim that really confirms to Brody that it is a shark, because Brody sees it from the beach. Once again, originally in the script and in the book, the shark was supposed to breach. The kid's on a raft, and the shark is supposed to breach and, get the kid and dive back down. And they actually filmed it like that. You can find footage of this little mannequin, kind of dummy, blood-filled fake boy on a raft, and the puppet coming out of the water, full-sized. And in the documentary, the shark is working. I think they screen tested some blood packets or something with the kid. But anyway, so it was supposed to be this full thing, and I guess it didn't look good. If you look at the pictures, I think it looks pretty freaky, but it also looks a little insane because the shark is so far out of the water. It just maybe doesn't. And also, it's a fake kid. It's like a mannequin, so it maybe just looks a little too jarring, so I kind of get it. Anyway, that's what it was supposed to be like, but, it didn't look convincing, it didn't work, whatever the reason. So instead, they just show it from Brody's point of view on the beach, and all you really see, the attack from the shark's point of view first. So you see the shark coming up onto this raft, and instead of seeing a moment of severe impact, it just goes to Brody's view from the beach, and you see his shape just kind of roll over in the water, and then some blood flare up, and that's about it. And when I was younger, going back to this summer of me constantly rewinding and fast forwarding Jaws and putting it on slow-mo, I was obsessed to see what that was, because at that point those pictures, the alternate pictures, weren't released, so I couldn't tell if it actually was the shark puppet, or if it was just the kid, or if it was just someone with a cardboard fin flapping up and down, or if it was supposed to be a fin. I just couldn't quite tell what it was. And that is why that scene is creepy to me, because I think that scene actually looks like what a shark attack would probably look like from the beach. There's not a ton of footage of attacks out there, but the ones I have seen online, it's not like something that's easy to figure out. It's like thrashing in shapes and then red, and that's almost more creepy to me. And so once again, by not being able to film the shark like he wanted to, I think Spielberg recreated a really realistic attack, and it's really unnerving, especially because it involves a kid too. Side note, I think I'm breaking my rule about talking about violence in movies right now, so I apologize, but it's Jaws, so I gotta make some exceptions. Yeah, and so in later years, when I saw the alternate takes and what the attack was supposed to look like, I assume what we see in the Alex Kidner attack is, I think it's its dorsal fin rolling over, and then maybe one of its caudal fins, or the side fins rolling over. It looks to me like it's one fin, then the other, so the shark is just kind of flopping over. I have no idea, though. I would love to confirm that one day with someone who worked on the movie. It's kind of funny to think that maybe the shark really did just kind of flop over because it wasn't working correctly, and they just used what they had. But yeah, that is such a creepy scene to me, even still to this day. And that's to say nothing of the actual context of the movie, that this kid's mother sees it happen, Brody sees it happen. Super creepy, eerie stuff. If we're on the topic of the shark, and we'll get to other stuff too about the movie, but if we're on the topic of the shark, it's funny because we're talking about the reveal of it once again. The thing this movie is famous for is the slow burn, the gradual reveal of the monster, the fact that we really don't see it until the third act. But I disagree with that sentiment. I think we actually do see it in pretty great detail before the third act. So I think the moment that everyone considers the definitive reveal of the shark is when they're out on the boat, the Orca, Quinn's boat, to catch it. No luck so far, and Brody is throwing chum off of the back of the boat, a mixture of fish guts and boat oil. He's throwing it off, and it's on he makes a joke about chumming, and then out of nowhere the shark rises from the water in full and then goes right back down, and then Brody of course says the famous line, "We're gonna need a bigger boat." Now that is definitely the most that we see of the shark up until that point, but I would argue we actually see it pretty in full during the third attack scene, which is on 4th of July weekend, after these two kids have terrified beachgoers by swimming through the water with this cardboard fin. A woman who's painting on the beach sees the shark in the pond. I guess it's not really a pond, but like an estuary or a tide pool that's off to the side that no one's really paying attention to. And at the same time, Brody's older son, Michael, is with his friends on a little boat. And this guy tells them to haul it in, and in the background you see the shark fin, the big dorsal fin coming at the guy. It knocks into both of their boats. And this is another really creepy shot. You see the man try and climb back on his boat, and underneath the water you see the outline of the shark just rise up and kind of go flat and take the man down with him. It's very ghost-like, very creepy. And then the man resurfaces again to try and get back on his boat while the shark's chopping his leg. And the shark comes out of the water and is attacking and chewing the man from the side. Now we don't see as much of the shark there as we do later on in the orca, but we see a lot of it. We see its head and face for the first time, really. Up until then, we've only seen shapes. So, I go against the grain. I go against what everyone says. I think that the first time we see the shark is not on the orca. It's when Brody's son Michael almost gets attacked, and I think he's supposed to be like a Boy Scout instructor, gets killed. That is the true reveal. That's the unsung reveal of Jaws for me. Something else I love about this movie is just the feel of the town. I've never been to Martha's Vineyard. I'd really like to go. I think they do a bunch of Jaws celebrations every year. But my grandparents in Long Beach Island, New Jersey, they live on Long Beach Island, New Jersey. Barnegat Light is the town they live on, and Martha's Vineyard, not that it looks like Long Beach Island necessarily, they're different, one's in New England and one's in New Jersey, but they both have a similar culture, I think. Just this town that maybe is a little bit sleepier during the year. Maybe Martha's Vineyard isn't, I don't know, maybe it's really busy during the non-summer seasons, but my point being, these towns that really come alive during the summer, and maybe it's because Jaws came out in the 70s and my grandparents would have been younger back then with their own kids, but the older people you see hanging out in the movie, that just reminds me of my grandparents and their friends. It's more of a feeling than anything, but it goes back to that idea of horror movies also being nostalgic in their own kind of way. When I watch Jaws, I think, oh, this is a beach community I would really like to go to. And oh, I like sharks, so hopefully I would be smart enough to not go in the water and just watch all this from afar. Funnily enough, the island my grandparents live on, and like both my parents kind of grew up on during the summers, and I go there every year. I mean, Long Beach Island's kind of a big part of my life. But it's also actually the site of the first documented shark attacks in the United States. So Long Beach Island is about, I think, 18 or 20 miles long, and on the north end, where my grandparents are, that's Barnegat Light, and toward the south end is Beach Haven. And in 1916, there's a hotel there called the Ingleside that people from Philadelphia and elsewhere used to go on vacation at during the summer, kind of when leisurely recreational swimming was becoming a common practice in America. And a young man went there with his family, and he got attacked by a shark, and they tried to fix him up, and it didn't happen. He died. A few days later, a shark also attacked someone in Spring Lake, New Jersey. They don't know if it was the same shark, but I like to think it was. And then this is the really crazy thing. Another shark, and once again, I like to think it's the same shark as the first two attacks, swam into a tidal creek and went miles and miles inland into Matawan, New Jersey, which is not on the coast. Like I said, it's a creek town. It's not bordering the beach. The shark actually swam in there, killed 2 more people, bit the leg off of a third, and they think that shark got caught eventually in the Raritan Bay a few days later. I could do a whole separate episode about these shark attacks. They're actually almost more mind-blowing and out there than the fictional ones you see in Jaws. I wrote a whole play about them called Matawan, so I'm really obsessed with them, so maybe we'll do a special bonus episode one day. My point being, though, that these were the first shark attacks in the United States, and I would argue that to this day they're still the most weird and hard to believe shark attacks in the world. Whenever I tell people the story of the Jersey Shore shark attacks of 1916, people don't believe it because it's not that famous either. Outside of my play, which isn't famous, obviously, there hasn't been a ton written on it. There was kind of a crappy, I want to say, Discovery Channel dramatization of it or something. There's been a couple books books and documentaries, but they're not in the popular culture in the way that Jaws is, even though Peter Benchley has gone on record in saying that the Jersey Shore shark attacks inspired the book. Just this theory of a rogue shark that sort of not breaks from the school, because sharks are solitary animals, great white sharks are, but the idea of just not killing for food, just killing for whatever reason, whether it's because it's disoriented or sick or just out for blood or whatever. Benchley was inspired by that, and also Frank Mundus, who was this kind of like an outlaw fisherman in Montauk, New York. Not outlaw, but I think he would kill sharks by illegal means sometimes. He was a big inspiration for the character of Quint. So these things kind of converged and inspired Peter Benchley to write Jaws. He's actually said he doesn't regret writing the book, but he does regret what the popularity of the book and the film did for the reputation of sharks. He feels like they've been unnecessarily killed and maligned because people think they're just these awful homicidal eating machines, and the truth is they're really not. I'm sure I'm not the first person to tell you this, but statistically, for the number of sharks that there are in the ocean, the number of people that bathe in the ocean each day, and the fact that there's only a few attacks every year, it's actually really microscopic. Your chances of getting eaten by a shark, you're so much more likely to get into a car crash. I mean, like hundreds of times more likely. Anyway, that's probably not the most interesting information, because I'm sure other people have told you that before, but yeah, Benchley really regretted. He felt like he set sharks back a bit, so he wrote a non-fiction book later on called Shark Trouble, in which he just tried to present more accurate facts about sharks and salvage their reputation a little bit. There are a lot of things that are unrealistic in the movie. The big thing that comes to mind is the ending, and it's something my dad and I actually get into debates about quite a bit. So in the ending of the book Jaws, which once again the book is almost depressing, even the shark stuff is not thrilling per se, it's kind of dismal and defeatist. In the book, Hooper gets killed, which doesn't happen in the movie. The shark actually eats him when he's in the cage and rises out the water with him in his mouth, and Brody sees it, and he actually feels guilty because he feels a little satisfied about seeing Hooper die because of the stuff with his wife. So he eats Hooper. The shark breaches itself on the boat and eats Quint, which happens in the movie. And man, that when I saw that scene when I was little, that was so hard to watch. The way that the shark crunches down on Quint, and you see this guy who's been so gritty and fearless the whole movie just starts screaming, and you see the fear in his eyes. And as a kid, I just couldn't figure out how they did the chomping effects for that. It looks so realistic, it still does. Anyway, so that happens in the book. But then, as Quint is kind of stabbing the shark, Quint gets tied to the shark, and the shark is actually all tied up in the boat, the Orca, which is sinking. And rather than have this big standoff with Brody, the shark just swims toward him and then stops and succumbs to its injuries and drowns with the boat with Quint. Quint's leg is tied to the shark, Ahab style. And then Brody just kind of watches it, and then he starts swimming home. And once again, even though Brody wins, it's a downer of an ending, because his home life is more or less in shambles. The town is not doing well financially. It's all just really sad. And the shark just kind of eats it, and then he goes home. And apparently Peter Benchley wanted that. That was the original ending in the screenplay. And he had words with Steven Spielberg, because they changed the ending so that, as you know from watching the movie, Hooper has these scuba tanks on the boat, and once Brody is fighting the shark is chomping everything in sight, he throws one of the tanks into the shark goes back under. Brody climbs the mast of the boat, waits for the shark to come at him, and then shoots the tank, and it explodes the shark with it. Now, Peter Benchley didn't like that because his whole thing was like a shark would never just keep the tank in its mouth, and if you shot it, I think the tank would ricochet around, but it wouldn't blow up quite as loudly and big as it does in the movie. And Spielberg's answer was, of course, it doesn't matter. The audience needs that crowd-pleasing moment after everything they've been through and everything they've seen these men gone through. And yeah, apparently they'd escort Peter Benchley off the set because he was so mad at the change. And he since went back and they're fine. And obviously the movie did really well for Mr. Benchley. Rest in peace. So yeah, two very different endings. And my dad actually kind of hates the ending in the movie because his whole thing is that, sure, you could throw a scuba tank into a shark's mouth and it might swallow it, or maybe it would just rest in his mouth, but the way my dad describes it is it wouldn't just stick out like a cigar like it does in the film. And that's true. When you see the shark swimming at Brody, it's kind of jumping like this. And yeah, it's always funny. I'm on the Spielberg side. I'm like, well, there needs to be some kind of cathartic, big blockbuster ending. This was the first blockbuster, right? I don't think it would have been the first blockbuster had the shark just succumb to its injuries and stop swimming and sank to the bottom. That being said, I've always thought it would be cool for them to remake Jaws and just really stick to the book. Now, I don't want to say I'm anti-remake because there are remakes I really, really like. The Thing is a remake. I actually really like the Pet Sematary remake from a couple years ago, even though I was kind of alone on that on the podcast, but I stand by it. I think it's really good. So those remakes, I think they are both doing things way different from the original movies or from their source material. I'm all about a remake if you can do something different. And so I wouldn't want to just see the blockbuster crowd-pleasing Jaws again with better effects or something. I think it would be really cool if they did one that was more of a character drama with the shark as kind of an afterthought until the third act. Really leaning into this metaphor of decay in a town that's falling apart and people who are falling apart and a cast of characters where no one is satisfied, and that all becomes symbolized by this shark that's come out of nowhere. I think that would be really cool, and they could keep that ending with the shark just succumbing to its injuries. And once again, I get that that's maybe not as satisfying, but we've already got a Jaws film that is completely satisfying. How could the original Jaws be more satisfying? It can't. It's in my opinion, a perfect movie and a perfect blockbuster. So we already have that. I don't need to see it with a CGI shark or something, but I would love to see it just done in the style of the book. Get something that's both really dismal but also has a cool shark in it. We'll see it one day. If Hollywood does that, I better get credit for it. Just kidding. Something I want to talk about really quick, and there's so much more to talk about with Jaws, but you know, we only have so much time, is the Jaws ride at Universal Studios. This ties back to my feelings about why the shark in Jaws is scary. If you go on that ride, or if you went on that ride, because it's not around anymore, unfortunately, but if you went on that ride, the shark didn't look real at all. Just a big robotic head chomping and chomping that rises out of the water. But once again, that is scary. If you were on the boat and saw that in the Atlantic or Pacific Ocean or whatever, it would be scary to you, right? So I loved that ride growing up. You can still go on the what's it called, the Backlot Tour, which is in California, Universal, where you see just it's almost like a fraction of the Jaws ride, the full Jaws ride in Orlando. It's a little bit different because you see a guy get eaten. But I don't know. I watch these ride-throughs a lot. These where people go on theme park rides and film them with really high quality. And I'm sure it would be fun. But the shark comes almost all the way out of the water and is on a track and kind of goes across the whole boat while it's all the way out of the water. I don't know. It looks a little corny to me. Whereas the one at Universal was legit terrifying. And I was really bummed when they shut it down a few years ago. I weirdly have this reoccurring dream where I'm going to Universal Studios, sometimes with family, sometimes with friends, and we're running really late, and we keep stopping and stopping, and it's getting dark, and I'm getting really worried that the park is going to be closed by the time we get there. And we go there, and we're able to go on all these other rides, but we never get to go on the Jaws ride. In my dream, the Jaws ride is still open. And the dream just always ends with me being sad about not getting to go on the Jaws ride. I don't know what it means. It probably just means that I missed the Jaws ride. I would love to go on it again. Anyway, that's 1975's Jaws. I feel like we could do a whole other episode. I didn't really talk about the performances or anything. I got really caught up in the shark business, but hey, I'm obsessed with sharks, so this was really fun to talk about. Maybe we'll do another episode in the future where I talk about the performances and maybe some of the non-animal, the non-shark things that we didn't get to in the movie. Also, I love Jaws 2. Jaws 3 and 4, well, we'll see if we get there. Thank you so much again for watching. It's been so cool to see new subscribers and new views and all of that, and people reaching out on social media, so I always say it, I'll say it now. Let me know if there's a movie you want me to cover. We're in the official spooky season right now, so I'm going to be watching a lot of horror movies between now and October 31st. I watch a lot of horror movies anyway, but especially I really ramp it up during these months. I actually just watched the film Terror Train, which I had never seen before getting on this recording. So yeah, let me know if there's anything you want to see, or if you just want to reach out and chat in general. I'm always down for that kind of thing. So thank you again. I hope you're staying happy, healthy, safe, engaged, and even if you're not, that's okay, because what is life right now? Am I right? But regardless, I hope you're finding some joy, some relaxation, and not completely hating things right now. That's all I've got for you. Like, subscribe, tell your friends, and I will see you next week with a brand new movie.